Hello, everybody. I just wanted to give this sort of announcement and make this video. I feel like I've given you guys enough work uh, this these last couple of weeks, especially with the final writing assignment on personal identity. So for Thanksgiving week and here at the end of week, what is it, 13 now? I'm not going to be adding any more course material until after Thanksgiving. So I was thinking about doing some philosophy of mind stuff for next week. That would be fun, but it's just going to be more work for you guys and more work for me. And it's nice to, take. I want you all to take your time writing the final paper and doing as best you can on that. So I'm recording this video to kind of go over that and then say what's going to happen at the end of this class. So basically, at this point, you've got a paper that's due the last day of November. So I think it's next Monday. Not this coming Monday, but the Monday after Thanksgiving. So you have a nice long time to write the paper. And then the final 2 weeks of class after that are going to be on topics in philosophy of mind and philosophy of language, things that I focus on specifically, actually, in my research and in my dissertation for my PhD. So hopefully that stuff will be fun, and there will still be, at least another quiz or two. And then if any of you want, if your grade is suffering and you need to bring your grade up in some way, I will be able to write up a prompt for a extra, like sort of an extra credit paper, which would be a fourth paper, probably on a philosophical topic that has to do with philosophy of mind and philosophy of language, that you can write if it's completely optional. This is only if you need to do something to try and bring your grade up, and that's totally fine. You can also always go back and retake quizzes at this point and try to bring your grade up on those, because once you have done that, you can actually get a better grade with just a late penalty. All right, so what do I want to talk about? Let's see. So here is the module page for personal identity. Hopefully you've gone through this already. Here are the two readings, and here are the two sets of PowerPoints that I go through: the personal identity, mind views, and body views. Here are the 4 lectures that I've given, right? The first one gives sort of a background on personal identity, thinking about the what we are question, and talks about Cartesian souls. The second view talks about the psychological view, the view that we are psychologically continuous individuals. The third view talks about animalism. The third video talks about the view called animalism, that says that what we are is a human organism that is an animal. And then the fourth view that says what we are is a brain. Each of these views is distinct. Each of these views is interesting. Each of these views has its own problems. Hopefully you've watched all of the lectures at this point and know at least something along the lines about what view you like, and what view, what the argument is against that view, and maybe you have some idea of how you would want to combat that argument. Here's some other YouTube videos that are interesting and worth watching for some more background on this general topic. All right. Where is I guess I can just move from this page over. So from here, I want to talk about the writing assignment itself. So this is sort of the general idea and what it is that you should be doing, right? So, okay. So what is this writing assignment all about? It's all about personal identity. So all of the lectures that we've covered in this last like 2 weeks. And what I want you to do is, it's very similar to the second writing assignment on skepticism, but it's going to be about personal identity. So here's the basic layout. Write a 700 to 800 word paper that assesses one of the 4 arguments that were given having to do with personal identity. So basically what you're going to do, and I want you to follow this specific outline. Some people for the second paper didn't follow the outline that I laid out and told everybody that they had to follow. I don't understand why you did that. If you didn't follow the outline, I probably gave you a comment that said, hey, you need to rewrite this that follow in a way that follows the outline. Otherwise, you're not going to get a passing grade. And so hopefully, if you haven't, then go back and rewrite it, and then you'll be able to get a passing grade just with a late penalty. All right, so here's the outline. What I want you to do is pick a view. Pick probably like the view that you agree with the most, right? Of the 4 views that I talk about in lecture, pick a view, right? So you can pick either the Cartesian soul view, the idea that we have souls. You can pick the psychological continuity view, the idea that what we are is a psychologically continuous entity. You can pick the animalist view that says what we are is an animal, a human animal, or you can pick the brain view that says what we are is a brain. And be sure to say what this view is. Say what the view claims and what the view ultimately fundamentally commits you to, and give at least one reason that somebody might think that the view is correct, right? So I give probably a few reasons at the beginning of each of these lectures why somebody would believe in one of these, in any of these views, right? Sometimes there's certain intuitions that go one way over another. So I want you to give one of these reasons, sort of like give the view and then explain why somebody might believe it, right? And I give this example here, right? So if you choose the psychological continuity view, you might discuss how the view gets our intuitions correct about the Freaky Friday style cases, like the mind swap cases, right? Where somebody wakes up all of a sudden with somebody else's memories and proclivities and all that stuff. All right, so that's the first section. The second section is you give the argument against, the main argument against the view that you've chosen. So there, in each of the lectures, I give one main argument against the view. That's sort of like the most, what I see as the most difficult or devastating argument against the view. And what I want you to do is then sort of lay out that argument, explain that argument, and talk about each premise. So what you're going to do is, if you picked, the psychological continuity view, we'll talk about this in a sec, then you're going to lay out the fission case argument. And what I want you to do is, put each premise down just like you would with in the last one with the skepticism argument. You can separate them out, premise, conclusion, form. And then I want you to explain each of the premises as best you can, right? So especially the sort of main premises. So talk about premise 1, say why premise 1 says what it does, and then how premise 1 and premise 2 connect, and what premise 2 says, and then how that leads to whatever conclusion or whatever it is that you're talking about. All right, so that's the second section, give the argument and then explain the argument. And then third, I want you, because the view that you picked hopefully at the beginning is the view that you like or believe in. Third, I want you to pick a premise in the argument that that you think is wrong. So if you picked the personal identity view that you believe in, you're going to have to come up with a reason for thinking that the argument against that view is wrong. And so what I want you to do is pick one premise that you think is false and give an argument as to why it's false. That's like, give an example that counteracts that premise, or give a reason for believing that that premise is false. And for each of these, I go into some detail talking about how you might do that in the lectures. And so you can go ahead and use what I say in lecture, but I want you to elaborate on it and say it, discuss it in your own words. Right. So pick a premise that you think is false, discuss why you think it's false, explain the view that you're defending and how you can deny that premise and why you think it's false, and then give reasons or explain some strategies for dealing with any unintuitive consequences of the resulting view or the denial of the premise that you're giving. Right. So explain what it is that you're trying to do, how it is that you're trying to do it, and then anything that sort of happens as a result of the denying of your premise, make sure you kind of talk about that if something unintuitive ends up coming up, right? Like, all of that should be in the lecture, so you should sort of be able to see what I'm talking about. All right, so The four possible papers that you can write are right here, right? So you could write about the Cartesian soul view. And then if you write about the Cartesian soul view, the argument that you're going to want to talk about is the causal interaction argument. The causal interaction argument is the one that says something about how it's difficult to see how minds can interact with bodies if bodies are physical and minds are non-physical. If you pick the psychological continuity view, you have to deal with the fission argument. The fission argument, remember, is the one that has to do with, splitting individuals. Like imagine, you get into a transporter and accidentally the transporter zaps you to both New York and Los Angeles. And it seems like those two individuals in New York and Los Angeles are both psychologically continuous with you. But, they're not identical. And so remember, if you pick the psychological continuity view, you give the psychological continuity view, then you give the fission argument, then you talk about which part of the fission argument you think is false if you're picking this one. Animalism is the third one, right? Animalism is the view that you are an animal. And the argument for this one is the too many thinkers argument against animalism. There's a too many thinkers argument for animalism and a too many thinkers argument against animalism. And I want you to talk about the too many thinkers argument against animalism. That's the one that says that you are a thinking brain, and so you're not an animal. And then finally, the brain view. The brain view says that you are your brain. You are a brain. That's what you are. And on the brain view, the argument against the brain view is the thinking part argument. The argument that says, look, it's problematic to think you're a brain or that you're a whole brain because there are parts of your brain that aren't thinking, that aren't involved in thinking. So remember, what I want you to do is pick one of these views, explain the view, then give and explain the argument that's here against the view, and then figure out how you want to argue against that argument by picking one of the premises in that argument and giving me reasons for thinking it's false. All right, the assessment for this paper is going to be the same as the assessment for number 2. Whoops. So there's the rubric for number 2 that I've already given. And here's some special sort of rules of writing that I think are important for people to follow. I should have given these earlier, but this is just like general helpful rules I think you should follow for the rest of your writing career, especially in college. So one thing, so let me just talk about them, right? First, probably the most important rule in writing is say only true things when you're writing things down. If you're not sure what you're writing is true, there's 2 strategies to follow, right? Especially in a philosophy paper. One, go back to the material and look at it and determine whether or not the material matches with what you're saying. If you're not sure that it's true, you probably haven't understood what you were reading, and so you need to go back and look at it. The other option, if you're not sure what you're saying is true, and the material doesn't really say one way or the other, then you probably should hedge. That means you should probably say something like, well, it seems that blah, 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 rather than just, asserting it. 2, say things simply and clearly. Don't try to use fancy philosophical jargon or technical terms if you can avoid them. And if you do use technical terms or philosophical jargon, you make sure that you define those terms or explain those terms. Some people, when they're writing a philosophy paper, think, philosophy, I should just sound really philosophical when I write this paper. That's actually not right. Philosophy has come a long way. And most of the people, a lot of philosophers that we read, sound really obnoxious and obtuse. And the reason that we read them is because their philosophical views are so good that we overlook how bad of writers they are. As it turns out, most people nowadays are not going to end up being famous long-term, famous philosophers way in the future. And so it's way better and easier if your writing is simple and to the point and really clear. Just say things simply, say things clearly. Try to say things in a way that you would, explain them to your mom or your roommate. All right, 3, make sure you understand the material first. Then, and that you write in such a way that you show me that you understand the material. This is like the most important thing about writing a paper in college. When it comes to writing a paper in college, your first job is understanding the material. Your second job, and way more important job, is showing whoever's grading you that you actually understand the material through your writing. So that takes a funny process of figuring out how the understanding that's gone on in your head translates onto a page. And what you got to do is you got to think about how the other person's going to read what you've written. And if what you, and so ultimately that requires you to do a lot of proofreading or editing of your paper. And the best way to do that, I think, is to like read your paper and read it aloud to yourself or someone else, because you'll catch sentences that sound funny or things that just like totally don't make sense. And I mean, I do this. I in fact spend like 90% of my time when I write things rereading them and making sure that they look correct and sound correct. And I'll like read it to myself out loud or like under my breath in order to determine whether or not it sounds crazy or not. Four, be sure to structure your paper and be consistent in your use of words and sentence structure. Do not use stream of consciousness writing. Don't just blah on a page. Make sure you proofread after you have finished your first draft. Editing your paper should take you longer than writing your first draft, like I said earlier. Stream of consciousness writing is totally fine when you're like trying to spitball or when you're trying to, come up with ideas. Totally wrong for any structured form of writing. A structured form of writing is anything where you're like, you're supposed to start in one way and end in another way and, follow a prompt. In structured forms of writing, you need to build an outline in some way and be like, okay, this is what I want to say first. This is what I want to say second. This is what I want to say third. And so you should try to structure your paper along those lines. Being consistent matters too, right? Don't use different words for the same thing over and over again in different ways. It's helpful if you're consistent and you structure your sentences and choose your words in the same way. All right, cool. So I hope that helps clear things up. Finally, the last thing I'm going to say is next week, that is the week of Thanksgiving, the first couple of days of Thanksgiving. I don't want anybody to be worried or care about this, but I think on Wednesday of next week, I'm going to host a hour to 2 hour long Zoom class meeting for anybody that wants to come and talk to me about the paper topics and about like how they should write them or what they should think, or to just make sure that you understand the material. And that's going to be the only thing that happens during the week of Thanksgiving. Other than that, I don't have any more work for you guys or any more lectures or material planned for that week. All right. I hope you have, learned something so far from this personal identity set of lectures. And I hope that I'm excited to read some of your papers, and good luck.